What happens when one of television's most beloved morning hosts faces off against a guest who refuses to play by the rules? In just 37 seconds, a single comment would turn a routine interview into one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. Lorraine Kelly had seen it all. 20 years behind that desk, greeting everyone from Oscar winners to first-time authors, always with the same warmth that made her a fixture in living rooms across the country. Her show was a safe space, a place where guests could relax, share their stories, and connect with an audience that felt like family. But on this particular morning, that safety was about to be shattered. Joe Keery arrived at the studio with an energy that immediately set people on edge. Makeup artists would later describe him as dismissive. Sure, production assistants whispered about his demands, but Lorraine, ever the professional, greeted him with her signature smile as he settled into the guest chair. "Joe, welcome to the show," Lorraine began, her voice carrying that familiar lilt that had comforted viewers for decades. "It's lovely to have you here. I know our audience has been so excited to hear about your new project." Joe leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, well, I'm here, aren't I?" The response hung in the air. Lorraine's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. She'd dealt with difficult guests before. This was nothing she couldn't handle. "You are indeed," she replied smoothly. "So tell us about this new film. It's quite a departure from what people know you for." "Is it, though?" Joe interrupted, his tone dripping with condescension. "I mean, do people really know me for anything? Or do they just think they do because they watched me on some show?" Lorraine maintained her composure, her years of experience kicking in. "Well, I think your fans would say they know your work very well, and they're eager to see what you're doing next." "Fans," Joe scoffed, using air quotes with his fingers. "You mean people who watch this stuff while they're eating breakfast, half asleep, not really paying attention?" The studio crew exchanged glances. This was already going sideways, and they were barely 3 minutes in. Lorraine straightened in her chair, her smile tightening just slightly. "I think you'd be surprised how engaged our viewers are. They're intelligent people who genuinely care about the guests we have on." Right, Joe said, waving his hand dismissively. "Look, can we just get through whatever questions you've got written on those little cards? I've got actual important things to do today." "Of course," Lorraine said, her voice still warm despite the clear disrespect. "Let's talk about your preparation for this role. I understand you spent time with—" "You know what your problem is?" Joe cut her off again, leaning forward now. "You and shows like this. You pretend you care about the real answers, but you don't. You just want sound bites, little clips you can put online. It's all so fake." The audience had gone completely silent. This wasn't the playful banter they were used to. This was something else entirely. Lorraine took a breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried a firmness that regular viewers recognized. It was the tone she used when she wasn't going to be pushed around. "Joe, I've been doing this for a very long time, and I can assure you, when I ask a question, I genuinely want to hear the answer. That's why people trust this show. That's why they invite us into their homes every morning." "Trust," Joe laughed. Actually laughed. "That's rich. You're all the same, sitting there with your fake smiles and your safe little questions. When was the last time you asked anything that actually mattered?" "I ask what matters to our viewers," Lorraine replied, her patience visibly thinning. "And right now, what matters is giving them a conversation that's respectful and worth their time." "Respectful," Joe repeated, shaking his head. "You want to talk about respect? How about respecting that I'm an artist? Not some puppet here to dance for your audience." "Nobody's asking you to dance," Lorraine said, her voice steady. "We're asking you to have a conversation. That's all this has ever been." Joe stood up suddenly, the movement so abrupt that Lorraine instinctively pulled back slightly. But she held her ground, her eyes locked on his. "You know what? I don't need this, Joe announced, gesturing broadly at the set. I don't need to sit here and pretend that this matters. That any of this matters. Then why did you agree to come? Lorraine asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her question now, mixed with a steel that showed she was done being pushed around. Good question, Joe said. Publicists said I should. Build buzz, connect with the audience, blah, blah, blah. But looking at you, looking at this setup, I'm thinking my time would be better spent literally anywhere else. The crew was frozen. Cameras kept rolling because nobody had called cut, but every person in that studio knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. Lorraine stood up now too, matching his energy, but with a dignity he completely lacked. Joe, I think it's clear this isn't working. And that's fine. Not every interview is a perfect fit. But I do need to ask you to remember that there are people here, real people, who work incredibly hard to make this show what it is. And they deserve better than what you're giving right now. Oh, here we go, Joe said, rolling his eyes. The moral high ground speech. Very original. It's not about being original, Lorraine countered. It's about being decent. Something you seem to be struggling with this morning. Struggling? Joe's voice rose. I'm not struggling with anything. I'm just done pretending that that any of this performative morning television garbage actually means something. The words landed like a slap. Lorraine's expression didn't change, but everyone who knew her could see the hurt flash across her face before she locked it down. I see, she said quietly. Well, Joe, I've given you several opportunities to have a civil conversation. You've chosen not to take any of them, so I think it's best if we end this now. Fine by me, Joe shot back. I was looking for an exit anyway. Not that kind of exit, Lorraine said, her voice firm. You don't get to storm off and make this about you. This is my show, my set. And I'm asking you to leave. The studio went dead silent. In 20 years, Lorraine had never asked a guest to leave. Not once. Joe stared at her, clearly not expecting this response. You're kicking me off? I'm ending an interview that stopped being an interview the moment you sat down, Lorraine clarified. You've been rude to me, dismissive of our crew, and disrespectful to our audience. So yes, we're done here. This is unbelievable, Joe said, but there was something in his voice now, a crack in the arrogance. He'd pushed too far, and he knew it. What's unbelievable is that you came here today and decided to behave this way, Lorraine replied. I don't know what you were hoping to accomplish, but I can tell you what you've actually done. And you've wasted everyone's time and shown a side of yourself that I don't think anyone wanted to see. Whatever, Joe muttered, but the bravado was fading fast. Your show is boring anyway. Perhaps, Lorraine said, nodding slightly. But it's built on kindness and respect, two things you clearly don't value. So please, gather your things and go. Joe looked around, as if expecting someone to intervene, to tell Lorraine she couldn't do this. But the crew members avoided his gaze. The producers stayed silent. He was on his own. You're making a huge mistake, Joe tried. One last attempt to regain control. Do you know who I am? Do you know what kind of press this is going to get? I know exactly who you are, Lorraine said, and her voice was sad now, disappointed. You're someone who had a chance to connect with people who genuinely wanted to hear from you, and you threw it away because you thought you were above it all. That's who you are. That's not fair, Joe protested, his voice rising again. You're twisting everything I said. Am I? Lorraine asked calmly. Because from where I'm sitting, I gave you a platform, asked you respectful questions, and you responded with nothing but contempt. If I'm twisting anything, please correct me. Joe opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say? The cameras had caught everything. Every eye roll, every dismissive comment, every moment of disrespect. I was just being honest, he finally managed. Sorry if that's too real for your sanitized little show. There's a difference between honesty and rudeness, Joe, Lorraine replied. And you've crossed that line repeatedly in the last 10 minutes. Honesty doesn't require cruelty. It doesn't require putting other people down to make yourself feel important. I never said I was important, Joe shot back. You didn't have to say it, Lorraine observed. Your behavior said it for you. The way you dismissed our audience, the way you interrupted me, the way you've treated everyone here like we're beneath you. That all speaks volumes. Joe's jaw clenched. You don't know anything about me. You're right, I don't, Lorraine agreed. But I know what you've shown me today. And that's enough. The words hit harder than any shouting match could have. Joe's face flushed red. You can't talk to me like that, he said, but there was no strength behind it. I just did, Lorraine replied simply. And I'll tell you something else. In all my years doing this, I've interviewed thousands of people. Some were nervous, some were unprepared, some were having off days. But very few have walked onto this set with the level of disrespect you've brought today. Oh, spare me the lecture, Joe muttered. It's not a lecture, Lorraine continued. It's an observation. You came here with an attitude, and you've maintained it from the moment you arrived. I tried to give you the benefit of the doubt. I tried to steer us toward a productive conversation, but you fought me every step of the way. Because your questions are boring, Joe insisted, grasping for any defense. They're surface-level nonsense. My questions, Lorraine said slowly, were designed to let you share your work with people who care. That's it. There was no trick. No trap. No hidden agenda. Just an opportunity for you to talk about something you supposedly care about. Joe shifted uncomfortably. Well, maybe I don't want to talk about it the way you want me to. Then how do you want to talk about it? Lorraine asked, genuinely curious now. Because so far, all you've done is complain about being here. Joe had no answer to that. Exactly, Lorraine said. You came on this show not to promote your work, not to connect with an audience, but to prove some kind of point. And in the process, you've been rude, dismissive, and frankly, unprofessional. Unprofessional? Joe laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from someone who's about to kick a guest off their show. I'm ending an interview that should have never started, Lorraine corrected. There's a difference. And frankly, I should have done it sooner. I should have stopped this the moment it became clear you weren't interested in having a real conversation. So now it's my fault? Joe challenged. Yes, Lorraine said simply. It is. You're an adult. You made choices about how to behave here today, and those choices have consequences. Whatever, Joe said, but the fight was draining out of him. Joe, Lorraine said, her voice softer now, but still firm. I really do hope you figure out whatever's making you act this way, because this isn't serving you. It's not serving your career. It's not serving your relationships. And it's certainly not serving the work you're supposedly here to promote. Joe's shoulders sagged slightly. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and something vulnerable showed through. But then he caught himself, straightened up, and the arrogance returned. Thanks for the advice, he said sarcastically. Real helpful. I mean it, Lorraine said. I don't say these things to be cruel. I say them because somebody needs to. And clearly, the people around you aren't doing it. You don't know the people around me, Joe snapped. No, I don't, Lorraine acknowledged. But I know that if they did, you probably wouldn't be standing here right now, having this conversation. The truth of that statement hung in the air between them. Now please, Lorraine said, her voice returning to that firm, final tone. Gather your things and go. For a moment, Joe looked like he might argue further. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. But what could he say? He'd burned every bridge in the span of 10 minutes. Fine, he finally spat. I'm out of here. Just enjoy your little show. We will, Lorraine said. We always do. Joe turned and started to walk off the set, but Lorraine wasn't finished. Joe, she called after him. He stopped but didn't turn around. I hope whatever you're dealing with that made you act this way gets better, because this isn't who you have to be. He stood there for a second, shoulders tense, then kept walking without responding. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the silent studio until he disappeared through the exit. Lorraine turned back to the camera, and when she spoke, her voice was steady once again. "Well," she said, and a small, genuine smile appeared. That was unexpected. But you know what? We've still got a wonderful show lined up for you. So, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have some lovely guests who actually want to be here. The audience erupted in applause. Not polite, obligatory applause. Real supportive applause that said they were on her side, that they'd witnessed what happened, and knew she'd handled it with more grace than most people could have mustered. As they cut to commercial, Lorraine sat back down at her desk. A producer rushed over, concern written all over their face. "Are you okay?" they asked quietly. Lorraine nodded. "I'm fine. Really. It's not the first time someone's had a bad day, and it won't be the last. We just keep going." "That was incredibly professional," the producer said. "The way you handled that. I don't know how you stayed so calm." "Years of practice," Lorraine said with a small smile. "And honestly, getting angry would have only made it worse." He wanted a reaction. The best thing I could do was not give him one. "Still," the producer insisted, "that took real strength. Most people would have lost their cool." "Maybe," Lorraine said thoughtfully. "But what good would that have done? Then we'd have two people behaving badly instead of one. And that's not who I am. It's not who this show is." Another crew member joined them, shaking their head in disbelief. "I've never seen anything like that. The nerve of that guy." "He's dealing with something," Lorraine said charitably. "I don't know what, but people don't act like that when everything's okay in their world." "That's generous of you," the producer noted, "after everything he said." "It's not generous," Lorraine replied. "It's just realistic. Hurt people. That doesn't excuse his behavior. But it might explain it." "Do you think he'll apologize?" the crew member asked. Lorraine shrugged. "I don't know. And honestly, it doesn't matter. An apology would be nice, but I'm not holding my breath. Some people just aren't capable of that kind of reflection." "Well, you handled it beautifully," the producer said. "The audience is still talking about it. They're completely on your side." "I would hope so," Lorraine said with a slight laugh. "I didn't exactly do anything wrong. I just refused to be a punching bag." "Exactly," the producer agreed. "And that's what people respect. You stood up for yourself without stooping to his level." "It was the only way to handle it," Lorraine replied. "You give people chances. You try to bring out the best in them. But when they make it clear they're not interested in meeting you halfway, you have to protect your space and the people in it." "Amen to that," another voice chimed in. It was one of the longtime camera operators. "I've been working on this show for 15 years, and I've never been prouder of you than I was just now." Lorraine felt her eyes well up slightly at that. "Thank you. That means a lot." "We've got your back," the camera operator continued. "Always have, always will. And anyone who comes on here and treats you like that, they can find the door." "Appreciate it," Lorraine said warmly. "But let's hope we don't have to do that again anytime soon. Once per career is plenty." Another crew member approached with a cup of tea, wordlessly placing it in front of Lorraine. She smiled up at them, grateful. "30 seconds to live," someone called out. Lorraine took a sip of the tea, set it aside, and checked her notes for the next segment. When the cameras came back on, you'd never know anything unusual had happened. She was right back to being the warm, welcoming host her audience loved. But in that studio, among the crew and the audience members who'd witnessed it all, there was a new level of respect for Lorraine Kelly. They'd always known she was professional. They'd always known she was kind. But now, they knew something else. They knew she had boundaries. They knew she wouldn't tolerate disrespect, not to herself, and certainly not to the people she worked with. They knew that beneath that warm exterior was a backbone of steel. The rest of the show went off without a hitch. Lorraine interviewed a chef who was promoting a new cookbook, chatted with the author about their best-selling novel. Diane closed with a segment about a local charity doing amazing work in the community. Every guest was treated with the same warmth and genuine interest that had made her show successful, because that's who Lorraine Kelly was. One bad apple wasn't going to spoil the whole barrel. One entitled guest wasn't going to change how she approached her job. When the show wrapped, the crew gathered around, still buzzing about what had happened. "I can't believe he actually said that stuff," one camera operator said. "Like, who does that?" "Someone who's forgotten what it means to be grateful," Lorraine replied. "Someone who's lost perspective." "Well, he won't forget this anytime soon," another crew member added. Lorraine shrugged. "Maybe it'll be a learning experience for him, or maybe it won't. Either way, it's not our problem anymore." She gathered her notes and headed toward her dressing room, pausing to thank various crew members along the way. The makeup artist who'd tried to warn her about Joe's attitude. The floor manager who'd kept everything running despite the chaos. The audience coordinator who'd helped keep the crowd calm. In her dressing room, Lorraine finally allowed herself a moment. She sat down, kicked off her heels, and exhaled deeply. It had been a strange morning. A difficult morning, but she'd handled it the best way she knew how. Her phone buzzed with messages. Colleagues checking in. Friends who'd watched it happen live. Even industry people offering support. But Lorraine wasn't interested in dwelling on it. She'd done what needed to be done, and now it was time to move on. There would be another show tomorrow. That's what mattered. Not one terrible interview with someone who'd forgotten his manners. What mattered was showing up every day, treating people with kindness and respect, and creating a space where genuine conversations could happen. That's what Lorraine Kelly had built her career on. She changed out of her studio clothes and into something more comfortable. Tomorrow would bring a fresh start, new guests, new stories, and she'd be ready for it, just like she always was. Because that's what professionals do. They handle the difficult moments with grace, protect their space and their people, and then they move forward. She packed up her bag, turned off the lights in her dressing room, and headed out. The studio was quieter now, most people having gone home, but a few crew members were still around, breaking down the set for the day. "See you tomorrow, Lorraine," one of them called out. "See you tomorrow," she replied with a smile. And just like that, one of the most dramatic moments in the show's history became just another day at the office. Because Lorraine Kelly knew something that Joe Keery apparently didn't. In this business, how you treat people matters more than how talented you are. Kindness matters more than ego. And respect is something you give freely, not something you hoard for people you deem worthy. Those lessons had served Lorraine well for 20 years. They'd serve her well for 20 more. As for Joe Keery, well, he'd learned a different lesson that day. One about consequences and accountability. One about what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. It was a lesson delivered with professionalism and dignity, which somehow made it even more powerful. No screaming match, no dramatic theatrics, just a calm, firm boundary being set and enforced. The kind of boundary that says, "This is my space, these are my people, and we deserve better than what you're offering." That's what made the moment so shocking. Not the rudeness itself, but the fact that someone finally said enough is enough and refused to back down. Lorraine Kelly had built her reputation on being approachable, warm, and welcoming, and she was all those things. But that morning, she reminded everyone that being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. It was a masterclass in grace under pressure, in maintaining dignity while enforcing consequences, in being firm without being cruel. And the message was clear. Respect goes both ways. Always has. Always will.